Everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about the real world Miami. So, this part I usually record before I watch the season, but I've watched the season by the time I'm recording this part. So, overall, before I watched the season, I knew absolutely nothing about anything that happened on it. I knew then Cynthia, Flora, and Mike from the challenge, though I really knew Dan and Cynthia since they were the only ones who got significant screen time on the challenge. But I didn't even realize those two were on the same season together since I don't think they did a challenge season together. And nothing from the season comes up in the challenge, anyways. Now that I have watched the season, I do like it. I do think them trying to do the international thing with season 4 was an utter failure, not just with the cast, but the location. I don't know if they try to do that again in the later seasons, but I'm not shocked that they kind of went back to their roots in season 5 with them casting all Americans and this being set in the US. They still filmed for 5.5 months, and I do think it worked. I don't think the season is a favorite of mine out of the first 5, but it's hanging around at number 4 or number 3, in my opinion. A very solid season. There's a fair amount of drama. The cast definitely holds their own. And you can tell that they weren't that close, but it wasn't to the point where they hated one another like season 2. I did find it interesting that this was where they started forcing the cast to do things together, where this season had them being forced to start a business together. And that took up a lot of screen time. But honestly, I do feel like the reason why they did this was because they wanted to create drama. But compared to how isolated and separate everyone was in season 4 and heck, even season 3, I get why they felt like they needed to do this. But overall, I do like this season. We start the season seeing some of the auditions. Cynthia is a waitress who has never left her town. Sarah is a toy hoarder and an editor. Joe is obsessed with his girlfriend, which we'll definitely see a lot of this season. Flora is a bartender. They do this weird thing where some of the roommates are speaking to one another on the phone before they leave. We see this with Cynthia and Sarah and Joe and Flora, and then they travel to the location in these pairs. Mike is a Floridian who's not used to being in the Spanish part of Florida, where he's picking up a Cuban named Melissa, who lives in the city that they're going to be staying at. Everyone arrives but the final guy named Dan, who is very energetic as hell. Anyways, the house is immediately goofing the hell off, and I will say that they easily have the biggest slash best house of the 5 casts slash season so far. They do have a business partner, which is a new thing this season since the prior few casts were too separated, and I'm pretty sure just making them do this made it easier for filming and production purposes. Where they have to create a business, and if it's successful, it will officially be theirs. Due to this, the cast is looking for jobs, which was relatively hard for them. They meet up with a business advisor to suggest their ideas, which doesn't go well. There's a lot of commentary about Flora being attention seeking and liking to wear clothes, and she's definitely attention seeking, which we'll see throughout the season. Joe is speaking to his girlfriend on the phone and doesn't want to cheat at all, to the point where he's avoiding going to clubs with the housemates due to it. So his girlfriend knows that he was a hoe, essentially. So we see them arguing several times on the phone, and this will be the first of the many arguments throughout the season. He has the most experience in business out of everyone in the cast, so he's the main one coming up with the pitch. Anyways, a lot of the episode is about his relationship with women as he's flirting with a waitress. We then see them dealing with their fish or whatever, or something where they started. Honestly, ignore that part. Something about fish or whatever. I don't know. Anyways, he calls his girlfriend again, and it yet again involves another argument. We then move on to Cynthia's love life, where she's in love with a man for over 5 years, and it's a very up and down relationship. Dan feels really good and cocky due to his modeling agency job, which he brags about to his roommates. He and his roommates are invited to a party that they got via his job. And he's really offended that Cynthia blew it off to go on a date, because how dare she? It's so ridiculous. There's been no progress in what they're trying to create as a business model or for a business model, and Dan is essentially talking way too much, which is pissing off his roommates, but Mike's the only one who's actually speaking up. Dan's dramatic self runs out of the house and has to be calmed down by Melissa because he kind of ties it to him being gay, which I don't know how I feel about that. And then he also speaks to Sarah and Joe, asking if he talks too much, but they really don't want to have this conversation. Dan does some more modeling shoots and is doing a runway show where he invites some of the roommates to see. Sarah's relationship or relationships is very up and down. Joe is backing good with his girlfriend for now, where he's going to fly back to New York to handle some things. Turns out Flora is dating two men instead of one, where one of her boyfriends know about the other, but the other has no idea. We spend some time with Joe and his girlfriend in New York. Flora is continuing to two-tongue, despite her roommates warning her about the dangers of it. Joe comes back home with, or comes back to the house with more of his stuff, and the roommates did nothing with the business, which is so shocking to absolutely no one. Melissa has been dating a man for 4 months now. There are some issues in their relationship, and Dan is also dating a man who is not publicly out yet. So he's filming a reality show, so that was going to get blown up sooner than later. Joe is getting frustrated with how unfocused everyone else is about the business and is speaking to the Miami Chambers of Commerce to broker things so they can get some locations. And things are getting messy when he, Cynthia, and Mike are walking around town for their ideas, which just doesn't end well. Business is not going well at all, which I'm sure the producers knew about once they conceptualized this idea. But Dan has the idea of a clothing line, partially due to what he is doing, and he brings Cynthia to one of the meetings with the business people in his fashion industry. The other roommates do not like Dan's idea since they think he's trying to take over the project. So it doesn't seem like the others are offering any damn ideas themselves or being helpful. So I don't really blame him here. Sarah is going on an interview for a warehousing job, I believe, but they do make posters about advertising to investors. So progress. Anyways, they can only post in certain places, but Sarah is learning a lot about business from her new job. Flo is having issues with his girlfriend yet again. Flo is freaking out, and she somehow ends with a poisonous bite. One of her boyfriends, I don't know which one, doesn't believe her because she's an attention whore, essentially. Things are getting smooth with the business idea. Finally, or at least at this point, or for once, though I'm pretty sure it'll change again. Joe is getting close to some other women as he's speaking to them on the phone and makes out with one another. After struggling, or talking about struggling with having female friends, so he kind of blew it there for himself. Anyways, the woman asks him why he's coming home so late, and his woman roommate, I mean, and he's immediately defensive. Cynthia doesn't have money and changed her mind about the business, as she could be making money via a job instead, so she's looking for a job at this point. Bro is picking up his girlfriend from the airport and is shocked that she. Sorry, I'm sorry. And the roommates are shocked that she is so tall. It doesn't take long for them to argue. Mike gets a business job, and they all fight about the business not working yet again, and some of them getting jobs. Cynthia tells Joe that his girl is essentially a bitch and isn't good for him. The couple argues some more because he was supposed to pick her up, but he was late picking her up by an hour because he was at a restaurant or a diner with Cynthia, who was essentially trashing him, and he tells his girlfriend this. Anyways, his girlfriend refuses to stay in the house as she doesn't want to get to know him, which pisses him off. There's another meeting. Mike essentially doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. None of the roommates like Joe's girlfriend, which pisses him off. We get content about Joe and his ties to religion, and we see him and his girlfriend, Nick, I believe. Yeah, I think that's her name. Arguing again. Dan is still modeling, but is told by his agent that he acts too flamboyant for his image and is still dating a closeted man. So essentially, they're telling Dan to not be more straight, but to calm his ass down, essentially. Joe visits his girlfriend. They argue yet again, where he is mad that a man gave her a rose. She misses a business group meeting due to his relationship issues, and they all think that he's going to fly back to New York and just essentially quit the show. Dan's brother stays with him for a bit. So we'll get a bit more about their dynamic, and Dan argues with his boyfriend as he's tired of sneaking around, and he breaks up with that guy And we learn more about Dan's family, their conservative beliefs, and essentially them knowing the entire time that Dan's gay. Joe's girlfriend flies back home and they are still together somehow. Sarah has been skating a lot, so she is building a skating rink at the house without asking the house guests about it, and they're getting annoyed with her antics. Cynthia is very homesick, and we learn that her father and her sister died. Her father from lung cancer, and we don't know how her sister died, but it was very sudden, and they weren't expecting it. Whereas she can't really go to funerals, but she does understand loss. Flo and Sarah are arguing about dishes and other house stuff. Three random kids that know Sarah comes to the house, and she isn't even there, and they end up taking over the house and causing a bunch of commotion. Where the hell are their parents, and why did the camera crew randomly allow random kids to stay at the house? Flows over this entire situation, and she writes another letter for Sarah to see as she tried to discipline the kids, but they just didn't listen. And Sarah arrives home to see the note, letting cut. Sorry. Flo kicked the kids out of the house, and then when Sarah came back home to see the note, she invites the kids back into the house. The male roommates are more receptive to the kids, and the woman comes back home to see the mess. Flora argues with Sarah yet again, and she kicks the kids out of the house again. I do see both sides in this fight, though, where Sarah is like, okay, these are kids who are in need. We need to support them. If we support them and give them a place to hang out, they'll do better. But I do see Flo's point where they're disrespectful and rude AF, and they don't have no damn decency or manners. But I do think Flora went too far with threatening her. Cynthia meets with the business advisor and doesn't see herself owning a business as her entire family rents, leases, and works for other people. The roommates speak to Sarah about how she needs to consider her six other roommates when she does things like this. Melissa is reading everyone's letters, and the roommates are getting more than tired of this. We do learn more about Melissa, how her family doesn't speak English, and how hard it was to migrate from Cuba, but she's taking the business very seriously at this point. Sarah's friends do stay at the house, and we do see them get along with the housemates for the most part. Melissa does make some rude comments about Sarah's friends being too poor to afford food at the restaurant, so the two of them kind of go at it at the restaurant, and it was a rude comment. Why would she assume that they couldn't afford money to eat at a restaurant? Like, where did that come from? Melissa has found a manufacturer and is continuing to open letters that aren't hers. But when this happens to Dan, he is over it. He waits for her to come home. He storms at her, and they are yelling at one another. He calls her a stupid bitch, and she snaps at him for calling her that since it really triggers something in her and it reminds her of her father, especially with how she's acting, who has anger issues. They do have a conversation again, and they eventually make up, though it starts a bit rough. Dan's parents and brother are coming to the house, and he has mixed opinions on it. They refuse to even mention the word gay, according to him. There's some content about Mike and his ex that he's kind of seeing, but it's really not worth discussing. Dan's parents do show up and seeing his modeling shots, which they don't really care for much at all. They have one more week left to come up with a business plan, or they lose their capital completely. But that doesn't matter. Mike's ex does fly into town, though they are clearly hooking up, so I doubt they're exes. Dan's parents do seem cool. His mother escaped rolling around, and they're getting along with everyone. And they do meet his new boyfriend. Everyone is stressing out about the business, and a few people who are working on the business, i.e., Joe and Flora, are doing most of the work, and they are rightfully pissed off. We have yet another business meeting that does not go well, and they are all fighting in front of the business investor as people are just walking out. Cynthia still has a back and forth with her ex boyfriend Trevor, and they're arguing about her staying in Miami, where they are barely seeing one another, and he doesn't want to come, but it's no different than when they were back together at home. Joe feels like he's doing most of the work, so he bails, and Flo decides to bail as well, which pisses off everyone else. Cynthia gets a letter from her high school boyfriend who's in and out of jail and wants her to come and declare her love to him if she wants to, which weird. The roommates are not impressed with the last minute notice that Joe gave to everyone, and Cynthia officially bails as well. Sarah comes up with an idea of delivering desserts on the final day that they need to submit their drafts in. And because she is working, she knows the ins and outs of the business when it comes to the retailing, the stocking, and all of that. And her boss is even helping her with the pitch. Joe kind of wants to rejoin, but they refuse to let him do so, since he was for sure out. Joe is taking a course in New York while he's still in Miami and has not been doing much work. Joe also wants to be back in the business, though the others are still not impressed, as he was tired of everyone not doing anything, and he's kind of blaming everyone else. And he's recording this for a project of his at school, so his professor can see his process. He turns it into the professor, who isn't impressed with the video, as he's just blaming others, and tells Joe that he needs to start taking some accountability. Joe flies to New York to do his final class, but there's more arguing between Sarah and Flo about the business and Mark, who's an investor's involvement in it. Flo wants an apology from Sarah, and Sarah refuses to get it, or to give it, which is just lovely. The two of them, of course, make up by the end of the episode. There is more discussion about the business, and he wants his share to go to the dog, but it's clear he's doing this to justify being back in the business. Cynthia is about to pop a dog due to it being in the room, and she's just over it. Flo tells her not to do it and threatens to pop Cynthia, who dares her to pop her. Essentially, Flo tells Cynthia that she needs to calm her black attitude. What a fucking racist bitch. Honestly. And Cynthia rightfully picks up on what she's trying to say. She's had enough and is not bonding with the housemates, so she decides to go to Atlanta. So she reunites with her family at the airport, and we see how close she is to her big family. Cynthia goes to a lot of the pro black events and landmarks in the city. I believe it's Atlanta. And she talks about wanting to live during the civil rights era. Which, girl, I don't know about all that. The family does sing an acapella song. You can tell how close they are together. While this is happening, Dan flies back to Kansas and goes to dinner with his mother about his boyfriend, who just came out. We learn more about his parents and how they did not imagine him being gay, and his mother finally says the gay word, and their conservative family. He flies back home and is meeting up with another guy, and they're immediately bonding. He then meets up with his ex, who's pissed off that Dan is going on dates, so this conversation doesn't end well. Dan goes on another date with that same man that he did earlier. Melissa is talking to her boyfriend on the show, which I'm not paying much attention to, but it honestly might not even be her boyfriend. Anyways, Mike brings over a waitress home who has been flirting with him, and all three of them decide to go to the hot tub together. A few of the roommates are essentially watching them hook up and have an orgy with one another in the hot tub, and they're watching it through the cameras that they have in the house. I think this is the first time where roommates outright hooked up in the Real World series. I think. And the three of them move over to have sex in the shower, where Flora is essentially stuck trying to sneak into the washroom and connect herself, but the three didn't notice. Mike and Melissa are pleading the fifth, but it's clear what happened. Overall, it's a fun and lighthearted episode. Fran is not close with anyone in the cast and is struggling with that as they think he talks too much and he thinks it's about his sexuality. Dan and Sarah are not getting along due to business stuff. Mike took a day off and it's just getting worse and worse. Joe is flying to New York to attend his graduation. Sarah is pissed off that Dan is lying about doing things that he's just not doing, and Joe's at peace with his girlfriend. Finally, Mike and Flora argue because he offered to host a party for their business, and he changed his mind on that, and he essentially calls her a bitch. Flora then decides to confront Dan about them claiming she told Melissa that her boyfriend hit her, since this is what Mike mentioned to her during their argument earlier. But essentially, Flora wants to do this confrontation in a very weird way where they wait for him to cover and Dan's just over and he wants it over and done with. So he's like, you know what? Bring your issues with me here right now. That's his mentality. Joe ends up proposing to his girlfriend at his graduation and she accepts it, so they are engaged. Flora, Mike, and the others house guests or roommates confront Dan and she calls him out for being the biggest light in the house and being a poor example for the gay community. Ouch. They are planning on going to the Bahamas where Melissa decides to stay home because she wanted to, and Flora stayed home because Melissa was staying home. Everyone else goes to the Bahamas and they're just enjoying the country really well, where they are grateful that the other two were not there since they would have dampened the mood. Overall, it's a very light and enjoyable episode with no drama and a lot of good moments. Sarah's friend is doing a video and took photos of them during his last week. We learn that Melissa and Flo are very close, and and a lot of the housemates dislike Melissa. Not a lot of them like her. Cynthia mentions to Flo that the Melissa that was there in the first week is not the real Melissa, and she's a complete liar. Flo is harassing Sarah's friend about the tapes about them or whatever while he's getting out of the shower, and it's ridiculous, which essentially Sarah shuts the situation down. Melissa has not been home for a while or to the house, so Melissa has not been to the real world house in a while, so she ends up returning. Though she told them earlier that she was going to be out since apparently it's her birthday week. Melissa confronts Sarah about why she dislikes her, and Sarah thinks that Melissa thinks that she's better than everyone. The two of them are screaming at one another at this point, and there's a comment about Sarah's friends trying to make a corner of her, i.e., Melissa, that Melissa allegedly lied about. So, from what I get, there is deeper commentary about how Sarah accused Melissa of hooking up with a crew member that was married. I don't know. But, anyways, after all of this happening, Melissa decides to leave the house. Honestly, I don't have a lot to say about her. She was not the most interesting person, and you can kind of tell that Melissa was putting on an image that didn't work, and she got caught in quite a few lies and sticky situations during the season. Leaving so close to the end was also just weird to me, but I get it that she lived right there anyway, so it didn't really matter much to her. Joe is over the delivery business and wants to do a cafe business last minute, and the season's almost over. But changing businesses in 7 days is just not a good idea. Dan is still modeling and has a gig in Italy, but he's also getting an HIV test. It is negative since he's in a serious relationship now. Pretty much Flora is trying to take over the business so she can have more of the share, where that is how the others are trying to see it. Or that's how they see it. But Flora also wants to be the president of it and not a shareholder. Marissa still stops by for the business meetings despite not being a housemate anymore, and essentially Flo is voted against with her being president. Anyways, the business advisor that was guiding them pretty much throughout the season shuts all of it down since there's no business, so it absolutely failed. It is the final few days of the season. Cynthia was offered a job to help with the company buildings. Flo got an apartment in Miami. Melissa helps her move and argues with one of her boyfriends since he moved to Miami from Boston with the mindset that, or with the thought that the business was going to be successful, but there is no business. Her boyfriend didn't show up yet again, so they argue yet again after she threatens him in several voice messages. Cynthia changed her mind about taking the job when they were going to accommodate her with benefits, causing her, which would have had to cause her to stay in Miami after the season, but she ends up speaking to her mom about it, who encourages her to do it. So Cynthia gets an apartment there. Cynthia and Sarah have been close the entire season, apparently. Flo is the first person who leaves the house, and everyone else is starting to leave. Dan leaves for Italy due to the gig that he has and breaks up with his boyfriend, and is the next one to leave. The others talk about how they liked Flo because she was consistent, but Melissa was fake. But it's just Joe, Cynthia, Mike, and Sarah in the house at this point. But obviously, the remaining four do leave, and that is the end of the season. Kiara was such a breath of fresh air. You thought she would come in and be one way, but she was the complete opposite. She was a smart woman. She was very compassionate. She was very giving, but she defended herself and she had no problem standing by her beliefs. I did hear about her passing away a few years ago, but I knew nothing about the real world. So now that I'm watching this, I feel even worse about how her life ended up, though I wasn't shocked that she became a therapist, and how she took her own life. Rest in peace to her. So Dan is someone that I definitely had familiarity with since I did watch his challenge seasons. Though it was interesting to watch his origin story, where obviously we learned a lot more about him, but that's just the format based on the real world versus the challenge, which is definitely more one dimensional in the portrayal of them. Anyways, I did find him to be pretty irritating at points in times, but he was also kind of rootable. And I didn't know that he was a full blown model, and he continued that for some years afterwards. So I think now he's like a nurse or something. So that was very interesting. It's kind of interesting that Joe was low key the star and the focal point of the season, and he never did reality TV again after this, or appeared on the challenge, which was a thing a year or two after this. But maybe he was just over reality TV at that point in time. I don't know if he and his fiance got married or if they're still together. I just don't know. But they definitely had a lot of drama, and I did like how seriously he took the business. Though when he quit, he looked he wanted to come back. I thought that was pretty funny, and yeah, Cynthia is also someone that I was definitely familiar with over the challenge. She did 3 seasons there. It was interesting that she was the one that was chosen to do Road Rules All Stars, which filmed a year after this season. So that was pretty interesting. Obviously, we had live dates with her on the few challenge seasons that she did. I really did enjoy her, though you could definitely tell she was struggling with being the only black person in the season and not forming those strong bonds. She was very articulate. She carried herself very well, but she was going to defend herself. And I definitely see why she started getting some of those opportunities right after the season. Flora is someone that I knew from her 2 challenge seasons, though they were very spread apart. Though she was essentially giving an under the radar slash invincible edit on the both of them. But I did not like her on the season outside of the racist comment that she made and seemingly didn't take back. I don't know if she apologized off screen or not. She was just very controlling, very demanding. Her two timing with both of the men and her toxic relationships with her boyfriends was just uncomfortable to watch, though she did cause some drama on the season. So I know Mike did that 1 season on the challenge, but he was kind of a non-factor there, and he was arguably the most boring person on the season. He did have the threesome with Melissa and the other waitress woman, but he really did get a whole lot of content, and I guess compared to everyone else on the cast, it does make sense. Okay, and that concludes my review of The Real World Miami. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, I really did enjoy the season, though I don't think it's going to be the top tier of what I'm through with everything, and especially compared to the other seasons that I've done so far, it's not at the top. So, from what I've seen of the real world Boston, just briefly looking at the Wikipedia page, all of them have done the challenge. And looking at the timeline, you can definitely tell that this was around the time where they were starting to create spin offs where they could extend the real worlders and the world rules time in reality TV. So, I'm definitely looking forward to when that time comes. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of the more early seasons. So, anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye.